Well, thank you all for coming. I'd like to call to order the Lake Forest City Council meeting on September 15th, 2015. And let the record show that all council members are present. At this time, we'll open public session with the invocation from Bishop Reed Frisk from Church of Latter-day Saints, Foothill Ranch Ward. Good evening, and thank you.
Thank you. Our Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this evening at the Lake Forest City Council meeting, and we desire to give Thee thanks for all that we have been blessed with. On this day that the heavens were opened and rain fell upon us, as we are in so much need of this moisture, we give thanks to Thee for this wonderful blessing and ask that we might continue to be blessed with the moisture that we need to grow crops and to run cities and homes and for all the things that we're dependent on. We're grateful for this beautiful world that we live in, and we're grateful to know of Thy love for us. We ask Thee that we would remember at this City Council meeting that we are all Thy children, regardless of which side of the desk that we sit on, that we are fellow citizens in this community of saints and in this world that we live in, and that we ask that compassion and understanding and kindness would be with us. We're thankful to Thee for those who serve and protect us in the military, in the police, and the firemen who are battling across the state, and all others who give and sacrifice that we might lead the safe and free lives that we live. We're grateful for those who serve in our community and in our state and in our nation. We ask Thee to bless them, that they will have the hand of heaven upon them and make wise choices as they lead their areas. We're thankful again to Thee for all that Thou blesses us with, and we ask that Thy Spirit would be upon us this evening at this meeting. And we say these things in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And Pledge of Allegiance will be led by me, but I see that we have some Boy Scouts in the audience, and I fear for a nation without the Boy Scouts. If you boys, if you would like to come up and lead us in the pledge, we'd be honored to have you come to the mic. This is Troop 767. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for being willing to pledge with us to the greatest nation on the earth. The mic's right there.
Audience, please put your right hand over your heart. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, guys. That brings us to closed session report. City Attorney?
There is none tonight, Mr. Mayor.
And that takes us to presentations. I'm seeking a motion.
I'll move it.
Second.
That brings us to presentations. Oh, you guys have a presentation for us?
There was a motion and a second. I was waiting for a vote.
Oh, vote. Call a vote.
That motion carried unanimously. Agenda item 2, introduction of new employee, Amber Haston, Public Works Maintenance Aide, submitted by Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
Thank you. Good evening, honorable council members and honorable mayor. I'd like to introduce our newest employee. Actually, we have two of our newest employees, Amber Haston and Sal Quinones. Amber comes to us from the the South Coast, right? Yes, South Coast Water District, where she worked 2 years primarily in customer service and administrative support. So she's our new management aide in our Public Works division. So she helps primarily with, she's primarily responsible for the graffiti, contracting out or contacting out with our contractors, and support in general for the whole division. And then, Amber, you can come up and wave. Okay, there you go. Come on up and say hi. Sorry, I promised
Good
I'd do
evening,
this.
council members. I just want to say thank you, and I'm excited at the opportunity to work for the City of Lake Forest, specifically in the Public Works Department, and hope to continue the fine reputation that they have, be a part of their projects.
Well, welcome aboard, and thank you. I'm sure you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yes, and not to be outdone, Sal Quinones comes to us after, come on. Thank you. After 25 years of experience in Las Vegas and Public Works Inspector in the City of Indio. So he just relocated here, and glad to have him. So he is our first street inspector that we have in the city. So he's primarily responsible for the roadway, right-of-way, sidewalk, street, all the contractors that we have that we contract out. So he's another set of eyes out there to see what's going on in the street. So we'd like to welcome Sal to the as the newest addition to our team.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve the city, and let me just say it is a very good-looking city. I'm impressed. It's a beautiful community you have here, and hope to keep it that way.
Well, then I will make you your first complaint on Lake Forest Drive.
Okay.
Just north of Tribuco, as you're going up the hill on the southbound side, there's a buckling of the sidewalk. If you could drive down that and check that out for us, that would be a great thing for us, because it's quite a buckle.
I will see to it personally.
Welcome on board.
Thank
You so much. That brings us to the report from the El Toro Student Liaison.
And, Your Honor, I do apologize. Kaya McCullough, the new student liaison. With school just starting, there is actually no report this week. She'll be here on October 6th for the first time.
Okay. Thank you. We love our report from El Toro Chargers. Now, at this time, we're going to convene the Housing Authority, Rancho Cañada Financing Authority, and Assessor Agency. At this time, the Lake Forest Housing Authority, Rancho Cañada Financing Authority, the Successor Agency, Redevelopment Agency will convene concurrently with the City Council for the rest of the meeting. That brings us to public comments. At this time, members of the public may address the legislative body regarding any items within the subject matter of the city. No action may be taken on items not listed on the agenda unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person and an overall time limit of 30 minutes for the public comment portion of the agenda. Any person wishing to address the legislative body on any matter, whether or not it appears on the agenda, is requested to complete a request to speak form available at the door. The completed form shall be submitted over to the city clerk prior to the individual being heard by the bodies. When you are called to speak, you will see 3 lights, the first being green. That you have 30 seconds left when the light turns yellow. And when the time expires, it will turn red and you will hear a buzzer. At this time, the public comment portion will be ended. And we request that you save any further comments for a future meeting. Madam Clerk, have we had any comments to speak from the public?
Hannah Hess, followed by Leah Basil.
Good evening, City Council members and city staff. My name is Hannah Hess, and I'm here as a new staff member from the office of Congresswoman Mimi Walters. I'm here to introduce myself to you, as I will be her liaison for Lake Forest, and I wanted to let you know that you can contact me with any issues you would like to bring to her attention. I left a stack of my business cards with Stephanie Smith. So please contact me with any issues you'd like to bring to her attention. Thanks so much.
Thank you for coming and introducing yourself.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Leah Basil, followed by Paul Mathias.
Good evening, council members. My name is Leah Basil. I'm the president of the Portola Hills 2 Association. Our association represents 690 homes, and I'm coming to discuss the Saddleback Ranch Road project. We actually think it's a great idea. We love the islands. We love how it's going to make our community look. However, I'm noticing several homeowners are expressing great concern over cyclists on that road. The way that the islands have been designed, unfortunately, do no longer allow the margin required by law for cyclists on the road. 1 year ago, actually a year ago tomorrow, Governor Brown wrote into law AB 1371 requiring 3 feet clearance between motorists and cyclists. If you've driven up that road recently, you will see that that's not the case. There's not enough room for cyclists. I've been in discussion with, actually I received an email from Doug Anderson today talking about the way that it's been configured to slow traffic. And he said in certain segments on Saddleback Ranch Road would require cyclists and motorists to do in-line driving up, where you wouldn't be side by side. It would be a cyclist going up the road and a car following behind. But if you see the steep incline that there is on Saddleback Ranch Road, you'll see that it's not going to work, because cyclists really can't go faster than 5 or 10 miles an hour on a steep incline. And then you got a row of cars coming up behind you. It's going to cause a traffic nightmare. And I don't really want any of my residents to become a martyr, because maybe the margins are a little bit too narrow. I'd really like to see this on the agenda. I think it's a very important item for our community. Again, we do support the project. We think it's going to be great. We just think that those islands need to be narrowed a little bit more.
Thank you. We'll take further notice with the Public Works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Paul Mathias, followed by Grady Glover.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I'd like to start by thanking you for the hours and the effort you put in for the city. Today I'd like to give you some feedback from what I feel is obvious to me, and from reading the newspaper and what I see that's a concern that tears at the quality of life in Foothill Ranch. I've been a resident of Foothill Ranch since March of 1994, and since that time there's been a dramatic change in the character of the community. Part of that is just growth. Part of that growth is subject to the extension of Alton Park, the enhancement of the commercial zoning, some of the decisions made by the council that increases housing development, which is certainly something that could happen. But also, there are other issues regarding assembly bills and propositions that impact crime in the community. So specifically, I'd like to start and say where I live in Foothill Ranch near Alton Park, since I've lived there, 3 specific things have occurred that have had a negative influence in the nature of the community. First and foremost, that park materially has not changed one bit. But since the time I've lived there, they've increased the speed limit going down the hill. There's a very smart and attractive understated sign that said Alton Park, and it was replaced with a sign that is oversized, is incompatible with the community, and has a giant city seal on it with stadium lighting. Finally, more recently, there have been issues regarding signs that were put up, fluorescent in nature, calling it a playground. Because of that, I believe it deteriorates from the quality and the nature of the look of the community. More importantly, crime in this city has gone up dramatically over the period of the last year. Double digits, sometimes up to 40% for Part 1 crimes, according to statistics provided by the city. Up near my house at the top of the hill, there are people that live in the parkland, the wildland and the nature park, and commit crimes and deposit remnants of the booty in that neighborhood, and those are discovered. Recently they're discovered. A purse was discovered by the fuel modification folks that come out right before the winds begin here in the neighborhood. What I'm asking you to do, in addition to that, let me follow up, because the lady mentioned something that was important. I ride a bicycle and I ride it up and down Alton Parkway. Alton Parkway is a high-speed parkway, and while there's a commercial traffic enforcement officer that does a fine job coming out there, I never see a motor officer out there doing a ticket. I'd like 30 seconds, please.
I'm going to have to call you, if you could please wrap it up. But the fact is, we will take this up with our lieutenant on that, and I'm sure that we can address some of these right away. So thank you.
Can I just give a finishing thought real quick?
You make it.
What I'd like to see is I'd like to see the council work together with staff to come up with a comprehensive analysis of the change in crime in the city and conduct suppression efforts rather than just response efforts to try and address the issue. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Grady Glover, followed by Annette German.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I wanted to bring the council's attention to two important issues. The first of which is that, I don't know if you saw in the news lately, but Irvine's going to get Google Fiber. They're on the short list, and I watched how Google Fiber spread in Kansas City and some of the early cities, and it started in a small area, but it spreads laterally outward from there. And I think the city needs to do whatever we can to get on the short list to be right behind Irvine and beat out Newport Beach and Costa Mesa and all the other cities that aren't as great as Lake Forest. So put that on your short list, please. Google Fiber. And then secondly, I wanted to support the other Portola Hills residents here tonight and just bringing your attention to the fact that although the Saddleback Ranch Road plan was conceived in 2012 and went through a series of public workshops and meetings and et cetera, there were some recent changes to the vehicle code which now have kind of made that plan a little bit different than it probably was originally intended. And as a new member of the Citizens Traffic Advisory Group, I'd like to bring that issue before our group and maybe invite some public comment and just wanted to come and support the fellow residents of Portola Hills tonight in their concerns, because I participate in social media with a bunch of them, and I've probably seen about 1,000 different concerns expressed from residents. And I understand the way that city government works, and not everybody pays attention until things are happening, and people miss workshops and whatever. But the end result isn't necessarily maybe the desired result. So I think we should pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And like the idea of Google.
Annette German.
Mayor, council, and staff. I'm here. My name is Annette German, and I live in Portola Hills, and I've been a homeowner there for 29 years. And my concern, again, is the median. This morning, the rain was so bad that there was no place for me to go. It was flooding. I was probably doing 12 miles an hour, and I started fishtailing. And everybody behind me had to wait because the drainage there is not well either, where the medians are on Saddleback Ranch Road. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the fact that I have lived up there for 29 years, and there's been a lot of fires. I've had to evacuate twice in 29 years. If there was a fire on High Hill and Ridgeline was closed, as it was back in 2007, there would be no way for me to get out. And so those are my concerns. And one more thing is, there's a lot of kids walking in that period of time going to school. And if just one child pushes another child out into the street, there could be serious complications. So, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Ron Simpson.
Good evening. I'm also a resident in Portola Hills, and I'm calling to talk. I'm coming to talk with you about what's happening in our neighborhood on Saddleback Ranch Road. I think that to a person, everyone in the neighborhood I speak with feels like something is being stolen from us. I like it. I want to ask you to think about if you've ever had anything stolen. I had a car stolen 2 years ago on my way to Yosemite, and I want you to think about how violated you feel when that happens. That's how I feel about what's happening right now in our neighborhood. I've lived there for 24 years. I think that the design of what's happening on this road is just, every place I see something new is adding more hazards, more serious safety problems, particularly if you're coming down Saddleback Road at the intersection of Saddleback and Millwood. Sooner or later, somebody's going to destroy their car or their front end. Someone's going to go up on that sidewalk, and hopefully nobody's walking there at the time. When my car was stolen, I became pretty close over the phone friends with the detective that found it, and I learned that Fresno was the stolen car capital of California. And you know, at first, in addition to feeling violated, you feel angry. But honestly, I feel more violated now because I feel like my town, the officials that we elected to protect our property and look after us, are the people that's stealing that from us. I don't know if any of you have seen what's going on there. Maybe you are. I don't know how much you've heard from people in the neighborhood about how they feel. But every night when I come home, I try to not focus on the anger that I feel of what's happened in the neighborhood. And I don't know who voted for it. I'm sure that there are some reasons behind what's going on there. But I think that what's happening is creating significant traffic hazards and traffic risks. I think it's creating something that's much less safe than what we had.
Well, thank you for that. And we will be talking to our Public Works to see what's going on, but thank you so much.
Okay. Has this been coming up?
We can't respond. So the fact is that we had other comment about the road and the narrows. Thank you, and we'll look into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've had no additional requests.
Okay, at this time it brings us to the warrant registry. All matters listed in the warrant registry are considered routine and will be enacted by one vote. There will be no separate action discussion of these items unless a member of the council, the public, or staff requests specific items to be removed by the warrant registry for separate action. Madam Clerk, have we had any requests to pull from the warrant registry?
No, Your Honor.
Colleagues, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move it.
Second. Call for the vote.
That motion carried unanimously.
At this time, it brings us to consent calendars. This items for the City Council includes items number 5 through 12. Housing Authority, items 1 through 3. Rancho Quiniano Financing Authorities, 1 through 3. And Successor Agency, 1 through 5. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be acted by one vote. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the legislative body, the public, or staff request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Madam Clerk.
We've had no requests.
Colleagues?
I need to abstain on number 7, please.
On number 7? I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Call for the vote.
That motion carried unanimously with Councilmember Nick abstained on item 7.
That brings us to the public hearing. Fiscal year 2014-15 Community Development Block Grant Annual Performance Evaluation Report submitted by the City Manager. I open the public hearing and I ask for the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I will defer to Assistant City Manager Deborah Rose for a report on this item.
Mayor and members of the City Council, the City is a recipient of the Community Development Block Grant, also known as CDBG. And since 1994, the City has received $9.4 million, which has been used to benefit the community. To receive this annual grant, the City must submit annual and progress reports to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also referred to as HUD. And the Draft Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, or CAPER, that is on your agenda tonight is one of the federally required annual reports. The purpose of the CAPER is to provide a progress report on the activities of fiscal year 14-15 and to detail how the 14-15 CDBG grant assisted the city in meeting the goals and objectives outlined in the CDBG 2010-2015 5-year consolidated report. So the 14-15 CDBG grant was in the amount of $420,000 approximately, and HUD regulations allow up to 20% of the grant to be spent on program administration, and so the city spent $71,000 or about 17% for that purpose. HUD also allows up to 15% to be spent on public services, and we spent approximately $55,000 or 13% on 9 public service organizations who provided assistance to about 4,600 individuals in the community. And these services included food pantries, primary health and mental health, fair housing counseling and advocacy, case management for seniors, and before and after school care programs for children. And as noted in the CAPER, through the city's funding of these organizations, the city exceeded all 5-year goals in the areas of housing rehabilitation and paint improvements, food distribution and job training services, and youth and senior services. The remainder of the grant funds were spent on capital expenditures and on housing rehabilitation. So 32 ramps throughout the city were reconstructed as part of the ADA Access Ramps Improvement Program. And as part of the annual Neighborhood Pride Paint Program, 9 homes were professionally prepped and painted. And through the city's Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program, 11 homeowners were able to complete needed repairs and improvements to their homes. Overall, 100% of the CDBG funds were spent to serve low and moderate income persons here in our community. So in conclusion, as required by HUD regulations, a public notice was published inviting public review and comments on our draft CAPER. And the draft CAPER was also available for review at both libraries in town and at the city's public counter. The required 15-day review period began on August 31st and concluded on September 14th. And to date, the city has not received any comments from the public. However, if we receive any oral or written comments tonight, those will be summarized and included in the final version of the CAPER. And pending the council's approval, staff will submit the final CAPER to HUD by September 30th. So this concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions. In addition, Ms. Jessica Gonzalez, our Housing and Economic Management Manager, is here, as well as Mike Linares, our CDBG consultant, should you have any really hard questions.
At this time, I'll ask for public comments. Or would you have any?
We've had no requests.
Okay. I'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'll bring it back to council. Actually, I'd like to start off with, obviously, I'm in favor that, the city helps to keep our city looking beautiful with this, but I was wondering, what is the ability for us as a city to utilize local labor, Lake Forest companies in construction and painting? Has that ever been brought up?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. We definitely always strive to use local labor here in town. Regarding the Housing Rehabilitation Program and the paint program, we always refer to the residents that are applying for the programs to try to locate a local vendor. We provide them with a list. Now, these contractors have to be, vetted through the state contracting license department, so we have to make sure that they have complied with every type of permit. Ultimately, it is the resident, the applicant, that selects the contractor, but we do, of course, encourage them to select local vendors.
And so you are on the list of preferred providers, or or not recommended, but a list of providers. There are Lake Forest companies on there.
Yes, I did confirm the information with our housing rehabilitation loan consultant that works here in the city as well, and she does have a running list, but one of the key requirements from HUD is that they have clearance, they have all the appropriate permits through the State Department for contractors, and so that is the first and foremost goal. But of course, as I mentioned, the applicant does decide. They get 3 bids. That's a requirement. They have to get 3 bids for every project, and they, of course, ultimately select the vendor with whom they're going to be able to have the best relationship, who they feel comfortable having in their home. But yes, we always strongly encourage Lake Forest service.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
colleagues.
Had a couple of questions. By the way, nice job on the report, very comprehensive, a lot of good information in there. Everybody should take a look at it. There's all kinds of good things there. The one issue that came up when we first got the report a while ago, and I don't think we resolved it, was that on the numbers of people being given food, this is a tough one, so I'll go to you. Let Deborah rest. We have two agencies we give the food to, and the people who get food from both of those agencies could be the same person. In other words, on Monday I can go to Families Forward and get some food, and on Friday I can go to South Coast. So I believe we're reporting the total number there, when in fact that number may be inflated because there can be some overlap. Am I correct in that?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. In response to your question, Council Member, most of the agencies, excuse me, most agencies that work with households that are at risk and are homeless, which both of these services do address, South County Outreach and Families Forward, they do utilize tracking systems for clients that are required by HUD. To the extent that's allowed, there are privacy issues involved, but to the extent that they are allowed, they do communicate with each other and try to, excuse me, try to prevent that overlap. Each client is given a unique number, so as they go throughout the county, if they were to go throughout the county to access different services, a database would actually register that that individual has gone to this agency or that agency to receive certain types of services. So there is an effort to minimize that duplication of services. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, but there is an effort among the Orange County service providers to try to minimize that, especially since services and resources for those services are so limited.
Well, I'm pretty sure, because I worked with South County Outreach many times. Their philosophy is they're providing you 1 week's worth of food, and they're happy that you go get another week's worth of food from anybody else. So they don't have, it wouldn't be a problem at South County that you had just been to Families Forward and now you're coming to them. Matter of fact, they build that in. That's why they only give you a week's worth of food.
Again, working with them, you may have a different experience. I know working with the staff, we work closely to try to minimize that duplication. Again, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm sure it probably does to some extent, but there is an effort to try to minimize that to the extent possible.
Well, how would you know that without violating the privacy rights of the people at
there
South County?
is information that is shared that agencies need to agree to speak to each other and to share that data. If they come to that agreement, then they can cross that data back and forth. That's where some of the hiccup comes in sometimes. Some agencies prefer not to share that information. My understanding between South County Outreach and Families Forward, they do try to work together to try to minimize that. I think you're right, though, in terms of food. There's I think an understanding.
Yeah, actually, I'm only talking about food.
Food's a basic necessity, and I think there is some latitude toward that. But when it comes to services such as assistance for utilities, for rent, transitional housing, those types of services, those are they really try to limit the duplication of those.
I was only talking about the food. Okay. I have another question for you on that same chart. You call it SL1, which is availability, accessibility of suitable living environments. And looking at the data there, I noticed that it's going to be a little boring for some of you. It's a list of how many people we're serving across all these different services. It's on Exhibit 1, page 2. And it's got the fair housing, the youth, the seniors and frail elderly, the health and mental health care, and homelessness services. Do you have that chart?
I do.
Okay. And again, this is just for my information. I notice on the first category, the risk of homelessness, and then on the fourth category, services to frail and seniors. In both of those cases, there's a pretty consistent, every year we're doing less and less in terms of the numbers. And I didn't read anything in the report that was addressing that, not that it had to be in the report, but I was just wondering why there were, definitely less services and consistently less year after year to those two groups. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yes, Council, Mayor, I would, part of that is the ongoing reduction in funding. Since 2012, CDBG funding has been cut almost 50%. So as the city's funds are reduced, there's less amount available for public service grants. Again, as indicated earlier, we're capped at 15%. The city is capped at 15% of funds, CDBG funds for the services such as the ones you're outlining. So as those dollars get smaller, there's less funds available to give to agencies, so they're not able to serve as many. I would suspect that's the primary purpose for the reduction in numbers.
Okay, well then, this is, I guess, for Deborah going forward. Those look, that's like the two most at-risk groups, and those are the groups we're serving less with the money that's going down. So maybe when we do this next year, we might look at that, because it seems as if of all those groups, those are the worst groups to be losing ground with, and maybe we can do some juggling. Certainly seniors and frail elderly going down as dramatically as it's gone down, and homelessness. So, and the other one stayed pretty stable. So maybe going forward next year we could, before we go ahead with the allocation, to look at that more closely. Okay, well, thank you very much. I had no other questions. I thought it was a very good report. So.
I just had a pretty basic question about the primary health care part. I think it's Camino Health, if I'm right. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head here. But with the federal push toward Obamacare, then is there going to be a continuing need for some of this supplemental funding? Or, I mean, my understanding was Obamacare is supposed to cover everybody in the country eventually, right? So I would think that the supplemental funding won't be necessary to the level it has in the past, and that some of those funds could potentially be, redistributed to other areas that are at higher risk. So maybe you can just give me a little explanation of what we see the 5-year horizon being with respect to supplemental funding for healthcare services.
We'll be happy to follow up with that.
Nothing further, Council? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll move we accept the report.
I'll second that. Call for the vote.
And for clarification, the motion is to approve the resolution, the staff's recommendation?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. That motion carried unanimously.
That brings us to discussion items. Item number 14.
Agenda item 14, ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Lake Forest Municipal Code relating to city appeal procedures, submitted by City Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, council members, this item is the culmination of a lengthy review and overhaul process of Chapter 2.04, Sections .100 and following, which originated with the City Council requesting that the City Attorney's Office review and potentially overhaul these sections of the municipal code. The intent of this overhaul was to modernize the appeals ordinance and to streamline it and to ensure that all due process rights of appellants were adequately met. In the process of our review, new case law was decided in California, which actually changes at least one of the requirements that is now contained in the appeals ordinance. Very briefly, just to remind the council of the import of this ordinance, one of the most important roles the council holds is as an appellate body. When it sits as an appellate body, it is dealing with constitutionally protected property interests and due process interests. And so our overhaul of this ordinance was primarily intended to protect those constitutionally protected interests. Because this was an overhaul, as you can see in the ordinance that is before you, there are a lot of changes. I will not go over most of those, as most of them are simply procedural. They affect staff, especially the clerk, as she processes appeals. The intent behind those changes is, again, to streamline the process, make it easier for applicants, for appellants, and for those who want to come and be part of an appeals hearing. I do, however, want to highlight three substantive changes, the major substantive changes that will impact you as the appellate body when appeals do come before you. The first of these changes is the result of the Woody's Wharf Newport Beach case, which was recently decided. As a result of that case, council members are no longer permitted to appeal decisions to themselves and state the grounds for that appeal. The court in that case stated that that process results in impermissible bias. The process that is now permitted is to have a call for review without stating the grounds. So the new ordinance allows two council members to make a call for review, to pull up a planning commission decision for review by the city council. Again, that call for review is neutral. The other two items I want to highlight actually are currently in practice. We're simply codifying that practice. The current appeals ordinance is a bit ambiguous when it comes to the standard of review and the type of review that is done. We've been holding appeals with a de novo standard, which basically means that the appeal is a fresh hearing, meaning that the council can make any decision that the planning commission could have made in the first instance. That practice is now being codified in the appeals ordinance. Following along with that, we've also codified a practice which is, because this is a de novo hearing, a tie vote of the council results in no action taken. What that means is, to use an example, if the appeal is on a conditional use permit and the council were to deadlock 2-2 because one was absent, on that CUP the result would be a no vote, meaning no action taken. Therefore, we revert to the status quo ante, which is Latin for what existed before the appeal was heard. Those are the primary substantive changes with the appeals ordinance. Again, there are procedural changes. It's a substantial overhaul. Staff's recommendation is to introduce for first reading this appeals ordinance, and I'm available and happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Do we have anything from the public?
We've had no requests.
Bring it back to council.
Just a quick question here on the Woody's Wharf issue there and how this has changed. Is this essentially just semantics, or, I mean, what's the difference? That's what I'm trying to get at here, is the difference between call for review and an appeal. So.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, it's a good question. The appeals ordinance as it is currently approved requires that the council state the grounds on which it's appealing the decision. So specifically state, we are appealing based on X, Y, and Z issues. The Woody's Wharf case says all the council can do is call it up for review without stating the grounds, because when you state the grounds, you show potentially the bias you have against the underlying decision. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, it doesn't. It seems like what they were trying to preclude in a lot of cities hasn't really changed. It's just the explanation that was put in the appeal isn't there anymore. I think that we've operated a little differently in that, at least on a couple of occasions I can recall, the person or group that has appealed something has actually voted differently than the appeal. So I think we've been doing a better job than most cities out there with respect to that. But we've almost been treating it like a call for review, I would say. That's just my personal opinion. You don't have to chime in. But, I think what they were trying to solve doesn't necessarily get solved. That's just my personal opinion. But it makes sense that we have to adopt it. So I understand that.
Seeing nothing. One question: if it was council was tied, wasn't that always that there would be no action? I mean, and they're restating that.
As I stated previously, we've been practicing. Our practice has been exactly that. It simply wasn't codified in the ordinance. The current ordinance is unclear as to that issue. The ordinance before you makes it obvious, makes it clear that a tie vote is no action taken.
All right. So you're looking for a motion to bring back to introduce first reading?
That's correct.
And I'll make that a motion, first reading.
Second.
Can I have a little more discussion? Just to understand that comment just one more time. No, I think I figured it out. One other comment I had was regarding the fees. The ordinance and the proposal and the it discusses about the fees being by resolution. Is there any consensus to maybe including the fees on the next? I don't know if we can possibly do that, but we can also consider the fees in conjunction with this during the next during the second reading.
That would be an issue for council consensus. A resolution has to come back to the council. A fee resolution, whether or not staff can act with that kind of alacrity, is staff's.
Okay.
And I've been reminded by our highly intelligent city clerk that also requires a public hearing. So we would have to take at least 2 or 3 meetings to get to that point because it has to be noticed properly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how my opinion is. It's just I was hoping that it was kind of an overall review and not just kind of piecemeal, but just my initial thought.
If you feel so strongly, you could recommend we hold the whole thing up and then do it. Or we could just put this part through now and put the other part through. And I'd prefer to put this through now and then we could catch up with it.
That's fine.
Okay. And seeing nothing further, I call for the vote then with the first and second out.
That motion carries unanimously. Agenda item 15, discussion of Orange County Vector Control Board vacancy, submitted by City Clerk.
Anything from the public?
We've had no requests.
Okay. So now we bring us to the critters.
Mr. Members of the Council, the staff, I think, provided all the information that we thought might be pertinent. We'd be glad to respond to any questions that the Council may have, but we have nothing further to add at this moment.
So this is filling in the vacancy until date?
Mayor and Council, the term of Mrs. Rudolph, who was our previous representative, expires at the end of this year, 2015. So if the council wishes to make an appointment, it would only be for Mrs. Rudolph's unexpired term, and then the council would need to make a reappointment in January of next year for either a 2 or 4 year term at the council's discretion.
Okay. Council?
I guess I'll start. Just with hesitation, because I think it's so close to her passing, it felt rushed, and I don't know. I'm just having a hard time. I mean, it's already agendized. It's there. So, I guess I'll nominate Scott, Mayor Voights.
Mayor and Council, for clarification, as stated in the staff report, any appointment to the board, whether it's for an interim period or the regular appointment that will be in January, must be noticed pursuant to the MATI Act. So we cannot make any appointments tonight.
Yeah, that would be good. So the critters don't get thrown on my table, but I moved staff recommendation that we make notice. Is that what you need?
Yes, some direction that you would direct staff to notice the vacancy, and the notice must be posted for at least 10 days. So because we do have an extra week between meetings, this item could be heard at October 6th if you would like, but also some direction on what you're looking for in terms of people who are interested in the position. Is it just simply a letter of interest, which has been the case in the past, or if you wanted something more comprehensive from prospective applicants?
All right, in that case, I move for the staff to notice the vacancy and solicit, if solicit is the right term, interested parties submitting a letter of interest. And it'll be all for discussion and appointment at the earliest regularly scheduled council session possible.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
If we just wait before we vote, just to think it out, as much as I miss Mrs. Rudolph's critter reports, which I thought were very valuable, actually. But in terms of timing, by the time we do all this, and then we notice it, and we get the applications, and then we appoint somebody, they might probably attend only one meeting, and then we have to do it all over again. So I'm just fearful that's going to be a lot of time just to get one meeting. Maybe it's better if we waited until the regular appointment.
Is that a possibility? I mean, do they need for...
They meet the third Thursday of the month. If council sees this item on October 6th and is able to make an appointment on October 6th, a person could attend the October, November, and December meetings. At the most, without a representative, the city would not have someone for 3 meetings.
All right. Well, your math is better than mine. I didn't see it that way, but okay. Then I'm happy with it.
So, are we okay then? Call for the vote? Voting on sending out public notice and asking for a letter of intention to serve.
We're voting to potentially appoint somebody.
For the remaining.
Yeah. Well, I was worried that it was only going to be one time, and the clerk clarified that if we acted speedily, we could get 3 in, and then it seems to me it's worth it for 3, not for 1.
Yeah, I don't know very much about vector control, to be honest with you. I know a little bit, but I know sometimes the length of service kind of helps with some seniority and being involved in leadership and stuff. So these 3 extra meetings might actually mean something if someone were to serve for a period of time. So it's another little added benefit there.
And the chances are the person that we appoint in October is probably the person for